Welcome.
The Pathology Innovation Collaborative Community is a regulatory science initiative that aims to facilitate innovations in pathology, as well as advance safety and effectiveness evaluation. The PI Collaborative Community aims to harmonise approaches to speed delivery to patients through collaboration in the pre-competitive space. The PI-CC is open to all stakeholders, public or private, including but not limited to academia, industry, healthcare providers, patients, and advocacy groups. Meetings of this kind are an example of lawful activity under federal antitrust law, because the focus of the meeting is on government action or policy, including the industry's responses or positions taken with respect thereto. However, antitrust monitoring is needed for companies' own protection, since they are direct competitors meeting together. These meetings need to stay within protected subject matters and need to be monitored so that they do not stray off into inappropriate areas, such as pricing and price terms, sales and service territories for particular products, customers and customer territories, each company's individual decisions regarding selection of suppliers or customers, marketing plans and especially future marketing plans or new product offerings, other proprietary or competitively sensitive information. Today's meeting will follow the written agenda, and there will be no discussion of pricing or other prohibited topics. If the discussion veers into those topics, we will terminate the discussion. If you have any questions or concerns about the propriety of a discussion, please raise it immediately, and we will take a break to determine how best to proceed. The Medical Device Innovation Consortium acts as the formal convener, and we will follow their conflict of interest policy. For additional information, we defer to our Code of Conduct and our website, www.pathologyinnovationcc.org. We look forward to moving the field forward.
So happy New Year, everyone. Welcome in 2023. It's almost an old year by now, but I thought I still say it because we're still in January. As you can see, the cover has changed a little. New year, all the prior years have been updated. We have a full year of meetings. I think with the exception of one, everything is recorded. And for those who are new here, we have these so-called steering committees that are open to the public every final Wednesday of the month. And so, as we do always, we go through several of the aspects that have been emailed to us and a couple of house business elements here real quick. As you know, the website pathologyinnovationcc.org is the main hub where all the information is available. If you or your company or your organization is not part of this landing page, several people ask how that works. You can get on there by just emailing us the logo and signing the charter, which outlines sort of the overall scope of this initiative. And as you can tell, there are quite a few folks on here already. So if that hasn't happened, please feel free to reach out to Ulla. You can text her directly and or myself, and then we will get you on there. The second part is that we try to change this up a little because the material as we're growing has reached a level that it's almost impossible to go through every single meeting and mention everything in adequate realm. So we leave some time in 2023 at the end of every meeting to go over that and to enable folks to look at all the various components that are emailed to us. We will try to get the meeting summaries posted ahead of time. So it's an anticipatory summary and you can go through this. So you should have received the announcement for today's meeting with all the different material. If you have something relevant to those different sections, you can also, that gives you the option, of course, to come prepared or to add your information or opinion or statement or other links or content to that specific meeting page, which of course also applies to today. So if you have anything in addition to add, we can add this to the meeting summary, including this video of today's meeting. And of course, if you are very interested or passionate about a topic, reach out to us ahead of time you're welcome to present your paper if there's a specific thing that you believe is important for this regulatory science community. That would be great. Hope that helps, or that will hopefully help in the future as well to streamline the information dissemination even more than we have already. All right, let's get started. I think the first part that we usually go through is some updates, and of course the end of the year plus early. There's a couple of things that happened. Some are relevant to many of you who are in the electronic record business or EHR business, as well as some in the drug approval part. First is this so-called risk evaluation and mitigation strategy, which is a document on technical conformance guidance, which was released on the 4th of January. This is a very technical combination of a guidance document as well as a technical conformance standard document. That is, for example, when you do a structured product labeling, or certain consistencies on documentation, especially when it comes to mitigation strategy or risk mitigation strategies. Second part, which is a very good compendium, which is the new drug approvals for 2022, which is a summary of various components, of course, to this group. CDER and CDRH have released several new drug approvals, and you may wonder, well, why is a diagnostic or pathology innovation group talking about this? Well, of course, many of these had companion diagnostics with the relevant drug assay pairs. A few of these have led to a couple of interesting projects, which we get to in a second. But if you haven't seen this new drug approvals compendium or summary for 2022, it's definitely a great overview to make sure you haven't missed anything. Somewhat in the background here, but it is by no means a judgment, is real world evidence. There was an update at the end of December. We missed this in the December meeting, but we definitely wanted to point to this real world data and real world evidence. And one of the papers we're going to present later from the commissioner, Dr. Califf, is touching upon this specifically. In terms of other updates that came from the agency, there is a fantastic, the so-called M11 template update, which is a clinical electronic structured harmonized protocol, or when you abbreviate this is the C# abbreviation, which is a very technical and detailed outline of how to capture certain EHR information in a rather structured manner, in particular for example, capturing data in trials, etc. So this was long awaited, so that's available. I think this is the third issue from 2022 about what's new in regulatory science. Of course, a lot of COVID-19 updates, but also the so-called regulatory science in action and several of the press releases. Great resource. I believe it is planned to be issued by the FDA every quarter. And then there's a pointer to the Office of Science and Engineering Laboratories, which Brandon Gallis is part of. And the OSIL has a summer research program, and there was a project catalog out there. While that might be too late for this year, there's definitely a great overview over the different projects that are going on in the OSIL section. I see, Brandon, you joined. Would you mind briefly outlining the presentation that happened not too long ago, I think on the 19th?
Sure. I go first on the last slide in that OSIL summer program. While the official program might have some deadlines, anytime you see a good match for a candidate, you can always ask me and see if we can put 2 and 2 together. On this presentation, this is to the Center for Devices and Radiological Health leadership team. So that's Jeff Shern and all his deputies and office directors. And this, there was a section devoted to all the collaborative communities, giving a minor update and also talking about ours specifically. This update was here, kind of just a summary of what we've done over the years. So that's that last slide. the middle slide is kind of who we are and what we've been, where we're coming from. But I focused more on what we've done, and I really am proud of these meetings. That there's a lot of information sharing, and then the webinars we've hosted. I think they're well attended and very useful information, sharing in that way, and even educational to that degree. The whole decision summary really was a big hit internally in terms of, wow, you guys talked about a decision summary, because people needed to know about decision summaries and what's in them. So everybody in the senior leadership team is in favor of continuing our official involvement. I mean, that's how I survive participating here, is they told me I can, even though I probably would, even if they didn't tell me I could. But now it's all official and everybody's happy about it. That's it. If anyone has a question, I'm happy to try and answer.
Well, I think
it's kind of the in and out of collaborative communities, coming and going, whether there's new ones, and they literally voted on whether to continue our participation. I shouldn't say my participation, our.
Well, we're certainly thankful for your continued efforts inside the agency, and also representing this collaborative community. I think it was, if I heard correctly, Jeff Shuren was present, and I think at least in part his collaborative communities were his idea, and he pushed it forward. And so I hope I speak on behalf of the community when I say that it's great to have you as sort of the liaison inside, and then of course jointly with MDIC, hopefully we can sustain this.
Joe, I'm going to go ahead and say that Jeff Shuren, the feedback that he did give on, and that question that he asked me is this group going to launch a project that the group owns, the collaborative community owns? Right now, I love the model that we have, where we have projects that are owned elsewhere, and they report back, and they get collaborators, and they get maybe advice and steering feedback. But the center director was asking if we were going to launch one, and I told him that there was talk about having a meeting this late spring, where we could, where the CRH was going to try and get some funders at the meeting, and we could talk about projects that should be done. We did this exercise once before, where people, but it was a little bit more steered to people that were raising their hand to do a project, but to turn it around and really make what are the needed projects, rather than what project does Joe want to do, or what project does Brandon want to do. And so hopefully we can do that sometime this first half of the year.
So we have a slide later. We can also discuss that now about an in-person meeting. So let me just move this upwards, because I think that's a perfect sort of segue into this. So of course we had our initiation meeting in Silver Spring. We had one followed, thankfully organized by MDIC, with a lot of participation. I think we had at the time over 35 people from the FDA, etc. So of course an idea is, should we have another in-person meeting in the DC area? I see Jitesh and Noor from MDIC are here. Hey Jitesh. So of course we want to make sure that many of the stakeholders, a few are listed here. Of course the membership is much broader, but if there's an interest, of course, to do an in-person meeting, review our current activities, and then come up with deriving like a key question, like you outlined, Brandon, to really take on one big project and unify forces. So I don't know, Jitesh, comments? Calling on you, of course,
Yeah, we are very supportive of the idea. I think it's due for an in-person meeting. And I think what Brandon relayed now as an ambition from FDA, or not even ambition, or a question from FDA, irrespective whether we are doing a specific project which is owned by PICC, we may have an opportunity to do a little more brainstorming and some kind of landscaping, and then the results or output, can be ideas for project that that can be given elsewhere or taken up by specific stakeholders. But at least we will create that pathway as a group, prioritizing ideas and then share it broadly, because each project may have its own dynamics. So whether it is funding related questions or expertise questions, but at least we have strength of bringing that subject matter experts and identifying the opportunities. So we can do that as a part of the in-person meeting, or we can do something between now and in-person meeting, and then in-person meeting can help us to solidify things. And one another ambition I have is we wanted to expand the PICC membership. So maybe we develop an agenda collectively. This group, the steering committee, develop an agenda collectively so that it is worthwhile for people who are not part of PICC to come and listen or attend that in-person event. So again, it has to be a collective consensus-based effort from our steering committee. In a nutshell, MDIC is fully supportive of this idea.
That's great. I see Esther is on the call here as well. So I know, of course, the Digital Pathology Association and EPA Foundation have been very supportive. I know, Esther, if you're on and want to comment what your thoughts are.
Yep, I'm on. And I believe it's a fantastic idea, because I do believe that we have great opportunities and already perfect topics and projects. But I also notice, and I speak for myself, but I see it's happening in some other projects as well. When you have so many things going on, it starts to get a little bit scattered. So I think a refocus would be really good. And especially now with it's a moving field, and I think being together and come up again, like, what is now the biggest pain, our joint biggest pain, and what should we highlight and prioritize, and yeah, and maybe there might be coming up some more opportunities also with the DPA Foundation is being set up. We're trying to get some extra funding to ensure that projects can be executed. So maybe one of the projects that we come up with could later on be, that we apply for a fund or something with the DPA Foundation.
That's great. Other comments from the larger group? I know we have many other representatives on here. I know some of the folks from CAP are here. I know there's a lot of activity in the artificial intelligence space, regulatory interests, industry members. Can also come back to this when we talk about sort of the other timeline. Of course, one of the questions here about the timeline is, of course, between, let's call it, the March meetings and the October meetings, there's the summer break. So finding a time will probably be somewhat critical, also in coordination with the other FDA events. But let's move forward and maybe revisit this, because there's a couple of interesting things that may also help streamline a meeting like this. There was one big legislative update at the end of the year that wasn't ready when we met last time, which is, of course, the finalization of the so-called Consolidated Appropriations Act bill. And one of the things that is in there, it's a multi-thousand page document. So if you have trouble falling asleep, feel free to join me in trying to read through this whole thing. It is, of course, touching upon many different components. And in chapter 2, there's a section 3308 or 3308, which touches upon something that is, I believe, of very high interest to this group, which is the so-called predetermined change control plans, which is also abbreviated as PCCP. PCCP, as worded in this act, now entails that a PCCP, which is basically what everyone has asked in this meeting, how are we going to regulate if machine learning is evolving, if we're doing continuous learning, what is actually happening, what is within and without a change control plan. And one of the things that the legislator now has indicated is that this rule that you see spelled out here, that with an appropriate PCCP a plan that's already in the abbreviation, that a certain supplemental PMA or a new 510K is not required for change as long as you're within that realm of your change control plan. That's, of course, a fundamental vector indicating by the legislator that this should be clarified. I think it is probably no secret to say that the FDA has worked on trying to establish a framework like that. And before I open this up for questions and concerns, I wanted to jump over to new projects. And after this was released, several people indicated that we should probably do a PCCP project. And you see here, there's definitely some change going on this beautiful symbol here. So it is, of course, a highly relevant regulatory framework, especially when considering, for example, software or software tools or devices learning over time. As indicated, we anticipate that guidance is to follow quickly, I presume in the early phase this year. We wait, of course, for that, and that will likely be issued as a draft guidance for commenting. So what we thought is to host a session on predetermined change control plan, just as it's almost a historic concept because several of these ideas have been published. The FDA's AI and ML framework mentions it. There's several conceptual figures around this. And we've designed a project page that already contains some of the available information from the agency, from the field. And then these sessions are mostly in the idea would be to meet and discuss what's already known and collect the information that's available now to be ready and have relevant context available when the draft guidance comes out so that we might be able to comment. Of course, this is probably the key element when it comes from a regulatory science perspective to enable performance monitoring and to define what is within a change protocol and what is outside of a change protocol. This touches upon many of the topics we discussed before. You know, risk classification, what is the function of an algorithm, what is, you know, the overall scope of this predetermined control change protocol. With that, let's briefly discuss whether we can modify this project in scope or evidence, and, you know, open for any comments or discussion points.
Joe, this is a super hot topic. I mean, on MDIC's diagnostics as well as our digital health software working groups, we have been working on some framework, of course, with the input from FDA. So the first set of framework kind of, focusing on diagnostics, which include examples from digital pathology. We did our work, industry-based work or the collaborative work almost a year ago, actually. The last February, we had a webinar, but then all these changes, recent changes, policy changes and other things, and a review process from FDA, it has been delayed to release the framework. But the news or the information that I got last week was hopefully we should be able to release that framework, which has got, again, some good examples, which we may or may not be able to include as such in the framework. But if there is a session which you're hosting, we should be able to utilize it and expand the discussions, even though we won't be able to include everything in the actual framework. So there are some, and again, there are other changes too that's happening. There might be a new director for digital health at CDRH pretty soon as next week or so. So that also can change the trajectory of review process and other things that we are looking forward. So happy to be collaborating.
So if I could, Joe, if there is a video from any seminars that your group, Jitesh, has done, I think we should get that in the page that Joe is starting to create. And if there is a willingness or desire to have one of the first talking sessions, your group to present where the kind of started, where the process where you are right now.
Okay. I'll definitely check for the webinar, whether it has been archived and made available, but or at least we will be able to bring in our folks, I mean, the subject matter experts who are actively participating in those discussions so that they can definitely share a lot of information with the broader group.
I think the first, let's call it session idea, was to establish sort of a basic set of knowledge or resources for people who are not too familiar with this concept, because many people in the field, if I think about some of my pathology colleagues, they may have not done a device submission or a PCCP design and what that looks like. And so some of it might be a bit too basic for, let's call it, the experts that are trying to or provide input into these frameworks. But I think it would be great to have, you know, everyone on this on the first call. But if there's some synergy in terms of providing additional resources or what people have thought and, you know, consider important, it would be great to include this in that upcoming session.
I have one question, actually two. So Jitesh, I missed it. I'm sorry. Did you say it was for entire digital health or digital pathology specifically?
So the framework is on for diagnostics, but the case studies or examples of SPS or PCCP are one is at least for digital pathology.
Okay. Awesome, because then I have a follow-on question for that. So that's why I have two. Is I do know it's a DPA. We have also been discussing this, of course, with the FDA in the past, and there was some involvement also with you, Jitesh, with MDIC. But I think that also, for the reasons you explained, we're a little bit stagnated, and then we were focusing on something else. But having said that, I think it is good to get this also that involvement from the DPA, because it's not only related to AI, I would say. We also have to think about beyond the changes of algorithms based on data. So yeah, I also am curious about that, if that's more explained and if we can get that more clear, because I know that wasn't clear from the last time.
Yeah, so we also have working groups in digital health side focusing on things beyond AI. So even though the first one, which I shared the link, is diagnostics and AI focused, but we do already have, but none of the working groups are yet ready for any releases, partially because the state of flux in the FDA's on FDA's side, but we are having very active discussions. Groups are working on examples and case studies, so that process is going on. And in fact, I think there's a slide somewhere at the end. We do have some volunteer recruitment announcement to specifically focus on those projects. So again, one thing which we would definitely wanted to do here is not to duplicate any work. So that's one reason I wanted to highlight this.
Thanks so much.
All right, we have that slide in a second. Ulla, do you want to briefly outline the Goldilocks project?
Yeah, so this project came to be with thinking about the sort of interesting relationship between innovation and regulation. And so the aim would be to explore whether a balance exists that could lead to optimal patient outcomes and what factors contribute to this balance. So it's a bit of a philosophical exercise, which is why we like to have sort of open discussion sessions with lots of perspectives getting involved, and ultimately ending with a manuscript and or an online resource. So session dates are still TBD, but once we know them, we'll email them out, and hopefully everyone who's interested will join.
Perfect, thank you. There's two additional projects. One that we had many requests last year. We didn't quite get to it, but the page is now up. Several people have already contributed. Some folks have done a SWOT analysis that's published. The FDA has resources on what assays are available. And we're outlining sort of the regulatory aspects of, related to the diagnostic assays and or companion diagnostics for HER2 low identification. And, what is needed for realizing this so that maximum number of patients can benefit. If you haven't seen the page, please take a look. We're also planning a session to discuss some of the relevant components. Of course, there's many things in clinical practice already underway. We just want to provide this. I know a lot of you have sent various publications, peer-reviewed papers, etc. So that's all on the page now. So it's not finalized. We will have other meetings, but you will be able to see at least where this project stands. A new project is called Data Breach Analysis Project. As many of you know, under the HITECH Act and a specific section, many of the data breaches require, if unsecured protected health information is leaked and affects more than 500 individuals, it must be posted by the US Department of Health and Human Services, specifically the Office of Civil Rights. We have a few people that are interested in collecting or compiling that data for an analysis. So this is basically examination of the data available through the Secretary of HHS to put together an infographics, how big this problem is, how many people are affected. And, there have been papers like that. I'm not aware of a publication directly tackling some of the practical aspects in laboratory medicine or pathology. I know we had a brief discussion in California. I see Jim Harrison is on the call about, data send out, test send out, and what data responsibility and accountability is there. I don't know, Jim, if you wanted to make another comment on this, but it would be great to solicit other people who are interested in this project.
Well, I don't really have a comment to make, except to just point out that one of the things that was discussed at our institution in the last year is that send out laboratories which are doing lab developed tests and offering ordering and resulting through portals that clinicians can send tests directly to may not have an agreement with the host or the primary health care system that requires them to do anything in terms of data breaches. And so in our situation, a test was sent to a lab directly from the clinic. The lab had a data breach. The lab reported that appropriately to HHS and to the patient. And of course, the patient came back to us and said, what do I do about this data breach? And how are you handling it? And we had no knowledge of the data breach at all because there was no contract or BAA. And there's no requirement that they report it to us because it was essentially an independent transaction between the clinician and the outside laboratory, which then billed the patient directly, of course. So it's just worth keeping in mind that those kinds of interactions can occur, and there are potential confusion associated with that. It's not that anything inappropriate was done in this case, other than what we in the lab might think about sending tests directly out. But there are challenges associated with that. And it's best if everybody that you deal with for patient care is under contract so that you can fulfill the patient's expectation that you're acting as the advocate for their care.
It's a really tricky subject, that triangulation between a laboratory, the patient, and a third party in whatever exchange of function that might be. A reference lab is one example. I know several of our members are in the data use space, meaning at some point it is not a sample that goes to reference lab, it might be actually data exchanged, and the business associates agreements are very tricky, especially when you do this across 3 parties. And so I think this will be an interesting, let's call it baseline assessment of what the data breaches currently look like. And of course, there's a lot more in the range under 500 people, but we wanted to use this HHS data. We move on. So these were 4 new projects. So please check those out on our website. If you're interested, please email Ulla, and we post the dates on the website and through our email as soon as we settled for the dates with the people who want to contribute. Noor or Jitesh, I don't know who wanted to provide some update on the MDIC part here. Noor?
Jitesh, would you like to? I have no.
Okay, no problem. All right. The first one is on cybersecurity. We in the past did multiple things on threat modeling for medical device and diagnostics. One is developing a playbook with FDA funding and with the help from MITRE, which is available as a free download. And then we did a couple of boot camps last year, and now we are offering, because there is a lot of demand. So we are offering a series of boot camps for device industry stakeholders. It can, the qualifications wise, it can be regulatory affairs professionals, actual developers, and so on. Of course, there is a small registration fee because we don't have any more FDA funding, but it's a good opportunity to interact with other folks from industry who are working on cybersecurity aspects. So the first one is coming in the series on March 13th through 17th. It's virtual. Next slide. So we have been publishing, resources and frameworks across the total product life cycle. And we do have a really strong division on health and economics and patient value, HEPV. So they have produced a new framework, as the title seen here. I think in the website, we'll include the links to access this free resource. And the idea is to engage more and more payers over and beyond CMS, who is already part of MDIC, but private payers too in the decision-making process. So that's available as a free resource. Next slide. There is a workshop if folks are interested in early feasibility studies. We are hosting a workshop in Boston. I do believe it's free event. Associated with at another conference in Boston. We might have sold out already, but if you wanted to inquire and get more details, please do send a note. This one focuses on the early feasibility studies. Next one, we did release our last deliverable on the 5G project, because we had a project which was commissioned for almost a year or so, ended December last year. The last deliverable was a landscape analysis of 5G in healthcare, and it came along with a one-pager on security enhancement. Again, available as a free download. Please feel free to review. It has got a lot of input from non-medtech stakeholders like AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile, and international agencies and so on. So next one. Next slide. This one might be super interesting because, as I mentioned earlier, we have a very active digital health software focused working group with multiple subgroups working on change control, patches and updates, software submission best practices, and so on. The project has been in existence for almost a year and a half now. In December, we had an internal strategic session, in-person session, in DC, and we realized that we can leverage a few more experts, but specifically on people who has got experience with software submission. We do have a lot of regulatory professions already in the mix, but we can open it up for few more folks. So if you are interested, or somebody from your organization would like to volunteer, please do let us know. And what they'll be doing is working with the industry and FDA experts on coming up with multiple frameworks actually in the software side. So PCCP is a part of it, as I mentioned, and then some of the review determination and so on. So there are very specific activities, ongoing activities. Next one. So I think this has already been covered. I think that's all from my side. Back to you, Joe.
Perfect. Thank you, Jitesh and Noor. Unfortunately, we didn't have someone joined from the WHO. I know several people from Europe are on here. Thank you for staying up late. It's like 9:30 or 9:40 p.m. One element that I was asked to present briefly is something that ICIA and DAVE has started, and then Ian Cree and team have continued, which is now a massively funded evidence gap mapping project that has this relatively long acronym here. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it is affecting the World Health Organization's classification of tumors. And it is referred to as a living evidence gap map, meaning this is a continuous improvement of mapping out which evidence does exist, is high level, and which is missing for specific projects and international collaborations to close these gaps. There is a tie to the Essential Diagnostics and the Essential Medicines group that is also co-organized by the World Health Organization. And as you can see, the European Commission has dedicated funding. It's a 4-year project. You will have the information, I think, in the link that Ulla pasted. You can see who helps, and it's a very interesting group that will basically continue what IC3R has started in terms of gap mapping this specifically for the classification of tumors. Of course, as part of that, there's a big digitization initiative. There's already some parts of the Blue Books are available as digital, and the slides are available. So that should be, I think, very helpful. So wanted to, of course, thank the WHO and their people, Laura Bisport, Ian Cree, and many others. There's a couple of resources that are pasted on the website. If I counted correctly, it's about 30. So these are in part publications with specific elements, but 3 I wanted to briefly highlight. One is a resource from IBM called Trustworthy AI, and it outlines sort of a framework on how to and what you need to trust. One, arguably, you probably have not missed that ChatGPT can be used for all kinds of things, and there's a very interesting how to actually use ChatGPT. A little bit of tongue in cheek, but if you haven't used it, there's instructions on how to put together a PowerPoint presentation in 5 minutes, how to get code written by ChatGPT for your own review. And then the third resource as a pointer is a very interesting paper published in, I think, the Yale Law Journal, written about close to 8 years or so ago by a legal counsel to the Department of Justice, who wrote a paper called An FDA for Algorithms, which is basically outlining a conceptual framework on how to regulate AI. I had not seen this. We were very thankful for 2 people pointing us to it. We share this, of course, with the community. And then it is very, very impressive to check what type and extent of publications have been submitted to us over Christmas and New Year's. So if you haven't seen this, I just want to quickly point this out. So Ulla has put this beautiful paging highlighter in here. So these are all the papers that have been submitted since our last meeting. And it is quite impressive. I think I counted 58 or so. So I cannot possibly summarize the incredible work and effort. Some of the papers have been in review for over a year. You know, some of the AI work in some of the top-notch journal takes that long. To shorten this and give us some time to discuss, I wanted to, this is sort of just an overview in the slide deck. So we had over 50 publications. So this is just to say great work, everyone. And there are many, many digital path papers here. I wanted to point out one paper that stands out. Of course, I don't know how the commissioner has time to write papers, but he did. And this paper is called Now is the Time to Fix the Evidence Generation System. And it is somewhat tied to this evidence gap mapping. And this is an outline. It's actually a 10-page paper. So you can imagine that's about a 28 to 30-page manuscript. And it is written to outline the urgent need to make sure that the access to the EHR content should be streamlined. There are many aspects about how to make sure that racial and ethnic disparities are being addressed, but really knowing the common goal of getting high-grade evidence requires good quality data from real world is sort of one of the key messages. So I wanted to point this out as one of the, I think, outstanding papers presented in clinical trials. So not necessarily restricted, but if you think about it, should digital pathology data be part of the electronic health record? I'm sure opinions diverge there, but I just wanted to point out that this is definitely a very interesting publication. This is an overview of some of the upcoming meetings. Ulla has spent quite a bit of time of populating the calendar online. There's a lot of meetings coming up. These are some of the sessions that I know many of you have pointed us to. It's of course everyone's role as a member of PICC to raise awareness about this beautiful community and what we're working for and with, and that, you know, we provide a platform here. So I know we have solicited a few people that will definitely go to the USCAP meeting. So we will have a get together there. So we will announce that, of course, at our February meeting. And there's a couple of other meetings here throughout the world, basically. And I just wanted to outline this, and please feel free to take a look at the news and events page, which is the calendar on the PICC website. Now, of course, as promised, we wanted to leave some time for discussion, possibly find a time for our in-person meeting. But I also wanted to point out that February 22nd is the next steering committee meeting. So that's sort of the pointer here. So with that, are there any discussion points? So this is the open part of the meeting. Suggestions?
Hey, Joe, I have a question. Wondering if you heard any feedback from Congress on updating the CLIA regs based on your multi-author letter of a few months ago?
That's a very good question. So I think what Keith is asking about was a publication by about 74 medical directors, which is Nature Medicine. Let me just find it so I can share it with the group. We proposed to continue the regulatory exemptions regarding ensuring remote work, and that is not only affecting digital path, but also that with appropriate verification that you can do remote sign out, even just logging in remotely, which was previously not possible. I think many societies have presented that at the CLIAC meeting. There has not been any final decision. And I know I reached out to CMS on January 5th, and they said that we're still under the public health emergency exemptions and that there have been no updates. So neither positive nor negative. So meaning currently it is still sort of in exempt mode. Whether CLIA regulations would be updated is a completely separate monumental effort. I have not heard on anything like that. It was more or less in that publication an attempt to say, there are many other subspecialties that are not necessarily accounted for under CLIA. First and foremost, molecular. I think most of the molecular labs operate under cytogenetics designation. Some of the other subspecialties are also not reflected, but I have not heard anything. And with respect to the remote exemption, that's still in effect. Let me just see if I find that real quick.
Yeah, that was Nature Medicine, ensuring remote diagnostics for pathologists. I thought it was well written. Nicely stated. My favorite statement in it is we urge Congress to amend Public Health Service Act by updating the 34-year-old CLIA statutes to account for non-traditional diagnostic modalities and the last 3 decades of medical progress. That's powerful. Powerfully stated.
It was a balancing act to get a wording done that 74 people agreed upon.
Right. I hear you.
No, it's I think it is, of course, a monumental thing. I have asked several people to figure out who actually helped draft and write CLIA. One of the projects that is probably very interesting is how CLIA came about. I know that the College of American Pathologists has a paper around the history of that. You know, of course, from Pap Mills to New York State, there's a lot of ramifications. But what's relatively unknown is who actually provided the input and then which law firm actually drafted the real work. So we're still working on that to figure that out, because and I'm not saying it should, but it might be an issue to discuss whether CLIA should be updated. And then, of course, the question is who would be the party or which parties should be involved in providing some amendments. But I think the very likely thing is that rulemaking, meaning additional amendments or changes as add-ons, is probably much more efficient than opening up the entire statute. But that's just a personal opinion. I don't know. Other folks have an opinion on that they want to share. Other topics, issues.
You give us all this extra time and now you got crickets.
Yeah, it's like, you know.
All right, there's a question in the chat window about 510K approval.
How to guide for 510K approval of non-AI digital pathology image management system for primary diagnosis. The simple answer is, I'm not aware of every single project, but Ulla, collectively, we don't have that, right? Because together we should probably know all the content. So it is not existing, but that would be a very interesting component. I know Brandon Gallus has a device advice page. We have a glossary that touches upon many things, but not necessarily what an image management system 510K approval. I would say what a submission would look like is probably the first step. I'm also not aware whether an image management system by itself has received approval, because it's usually an end-to-end. I think most of the approvals right now have been end-to-end solutions, right?
I think there is one, and so let me see if I can find it. And I'll share it.
Is it Sectra?
Sectra and Inspirata both claim it.
Yeah, I thought there was at least one.
And of course,
Yeah,
companies
as well. Yeah.
So maybe in reverse, Dawn, since you asked, do you
Right.
think there would be interest in reviewing one of these approvals similar to our decision summary for the AI tool?
Thank you.
I'm not sure I understood the question.
So you're asking whether PyCC has a how-to guide, correct?
Yeah, that would be useful for the industry member here.
We don't have that, but we could host a session similar to the decision summary that we did with Paige, with one of these groups that have obtained a 510K for an image management system, to go through how they did it. Meaning, instead of providing a, let's call it generic advice, this would be a little more focused. What were their claims? What was their intended use? What did they claim as an indication of use? What does the decision summary look like? And then invite the people who just went through it and have them discuss what they're actually, did.
Right, well, our 510K submissions are public, but how to do it is not.
I
The submission
understand.
the submission is not public, but the decision summary is public, and and that's the starting point for many people to figure out what was submitted. So to look at those three decision summaries could paint a bit of a picture about what was in the submission. Early in this group's life, we talked about a mock submission for an image management system, or viewing more of the viewer than the image management part. I had some folks that had public open source viewers interested in perhaps putting their device, their viewer, through that process of a mock submission. Obviously wouldn't maybe cover everything, but that exercise with maybe even an imaginary viewer or imaginary image management system could be something worth discussing.
Yeah, maybe to add to that is that with the Digital Pathology Association, we have sent in a pre-submission, which was very recently accepted, I think 2 days ago or something. So we're looking forward to getting a pre-submission meeting where we're going to discuss also the technical performance assessment guidance for whole-son imaging devices. And we try to break them up in modules. So if that is successful, then we also can get more clear, like how to validate your image management system and get a clear, but more also to how the first been assessed. And yeah, if any interest in Brad, you mentioned, I'm more than happy to help out and support.
Unfortunately, Esther, you sounded like you're orbiting the Death Star there, and your voice is doing Star Wars things and not coming through very clearly. I'm sorry we're missing that, but I'm also a member of the DPA, and we're eager to have our participation in these organizations produce some useful outputs for guidance for the industry members.
I think it'd be a good exercise, Esther, if you can at least hear rather than speak, to maybe even see what your plans are to present, if that's a possibility, and get some feedback for questions. Because I hear the discussion is about image management and viewers, and the pathway for those, as well as the technical performance assessment guidance. I don't know the whole scope of your plans, but certainly I would imagine if I was on the other side of the wall wanting to, see the questions that are being asked and maybe even find out the answers that are given. And I think that's one of the reasons BPA does these sort of reach outs to the FDA.
Absolutely, and that's one of our initiatives. We're hoping if a quarterly, just like what have we done, and it should be posted by the DPA every quarter.
Esther, we
I
can't
could
hear you.
certainly reach
Esther,
out.
sorry.
Oh,
I think maybe what we could do is ask the DPA for joining on the next month meeting and providing sort of an overview of this project for everyone without some audio trouble. Other
I would
topic,
have to be a listener on the wall, I think, rather than a participant too much, but
because
maybe.
it's active submission, right?
Yeah, I mean, generic questions and science are always on my, what I can do, and but to just hear the scope and get feedback, I'm trying to, I know some people are just gonna hesitate saying those things out loud because it sounds like forbidden above all, not sort of questions and scope understanding, but I don't mind putting it out there since it might be something people are interested in and hearing.
Another thing to tackle in terms of IMS would of course be to ask some of our befriended radiology colleagues, because image management system in radiology is of course an existing not only market but an existing pathway. So for a session akin to the decision summary, we could ask also from several image management system vendors other than just digital pathology to hear what has been working, what has worked, and what do those decision summaries look like, to learn a bit more across products rather than just focusing on one use case.
Joe, I think that's a brilliant idea.
Because we had as evidenced here by one of those earlier slides about the in-person meeting. I think when we had PCORI and the American College of Radiology with Bib Allen present, this was at the Arlington meeting with Jitesh and MDSC who organized that. They told us we should definitely come back with questions like that to identify synergies, especially to leverage some of their much more substantial regulatory science experience. I could, for example, see that would be a great session at an in-person meeting where probably some radiologists would really love to see, because many of those algorithms use pathology as a ground truth, how to integrate that across disciplines. So I think, for image management system, we can probably draw from their experience, while they can probably draw from our definitiveness in terms of diagnoses.
Excellent.
All right, we're at the top of the hour. I thank you very much. Please keep sending us stuff. Stay active, stay humble, stay foolish. Let's talk soon.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.